Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in a few weeks' time, parts of the country, not all of it, but parts of the country, are going to the polls for local elections. These are staggered, so you never get everyone taking part in the local elections at the same time, but this year's are the big ones. Not just because they may be the last ones before the general election, but because they offer Labour the greatest scope for major gains. Be a huge test for both Starmer and Sunak, but being able to tell who's won could be impossible. I'll explain. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So most of the seats up for election this year in the locals were last being decided in 2019. Now, in May 2019, both Labour and the Conservatives were suffering very badly in the polls. As a result, both lost seats. The Conservatives lost well over 1,000 councillors, which sort of works in Sunak's favour to an extent. Like, in theory, having a bad election 4 years ago cushions the Tories from larger losses this time, because people, when it comes to local elections and they're looking at the national picture, they don't really focus on how many seats each side won like you do in a general election. They work on the net gain or loss. So having a big not net loss in the previous local elections means that you're probably not as likely to suffer them this time. So it cushions them. Only problem is, because Labour weren't capitalising on the Conservatives' unpopularity at the time 4 years ago, it limited some of their losses. So of the seats being contested last year, for example, Labour already had most of them, because the 2018 local elections actually went all right for them. Pretty well, in fact. But this year, the Conservatives currently hold a lot more council seats than Labour. So the Conservatives have weighed quite a lot more, in fact. Now, this is something that can be corrected. The Tories may have lost a lot of seats in 2019. There were still plenty more to be lost. And another major point of interest this year is that many of the seats are in exactly the areas that Labour need to win back from the Conservatives. Like, there's a lot in the red wall. Not so much the case last year, for example. Now, consider that Labour have been attempting to cultivate particular messages when they discuss their policies with the media. They don't talk about all of their policies. They focus on the ones that they believe will resonate with the target voters in target seats. Well, a lot of those target voters will be voting in the local elections in a few weeks. So it'll be a really good test of how well that message is getting through. For those who wish to use their vote, not so much for local issues, but national issues, right? The turnout will be lower than for a general election, of course, and some people do use their local election vote for its intended purposes, electing local councillors. But many use that vote either along national party lines, as I do, or as a way of warning the party of government not to take the piss. I've said for a while, it'll be these local elections that are the real test for Labour. Their election strategy should be fairly set now. They've had previous local elections and some Westminster by-elections to flex their muscles. This is the first really big test for Labour, and they need to go at it. Show that they're ready for government by persuading a load of people in their target seats that they should send a message to the Tories that their time is up. But it's also a big test for Sunak. Johnson's allies are gearing up for assault on his leadership almost immediately after the elections. We're going to see a lot of people proclaiming victory or defeat, depending on how it suits their politics. The question is, what can we objectively consider a success or failure for either Starmer or Sunak? See, Labour are currently polling almost double their 2019 rating, but that doesn't mean they should be on for doubling the number of seats they win. It doesn't work like that. But you would think that, as a minimum, Starmer should emerge from the local elections with Labour winning more seats than the Conservatives. That would need a net gain of about 800 new seats. But some may think that this bare minimum would be a relatively poor showing, because both Labour and the Conservatives were about as popular as a fart in a broken lift back in May 2019. The Liberal Democrats and the Gains made huge gains then. The Liberal Democrats and the Greens, sorry. So Labour don't just have the potential to take a lot of seats from the Conservatives. They've got the potential to take them from other parties as well. Should Starmer be aiming for 1,000 seats net gain? More? Does it matter? Just as with last year when Labour made very decent gains, considering They made fewer than 100 net gain then. But given that they won 2/3 of all the seats, I mean, how can you complain at that? People did though. There were still people saying, well, it should have been more. Literally, they took 2/3 of all the seats on offer and well over double the number that the Conservatives won. And people were still saying, well, it should have been more, really. So should we look at what Sunak needs to do in order to declare some sort of success? Well, Sunak's problems are much worse than Starmer's, of course, in terms of judging success criteria. Labour are going to gain seats, and they're going to gain a lot. It's really just a case of people working out how many Labour should gain compared to how many they do gain. The Conservatives are going to lose seats, no two ways about it. But this is accepted, it's factored in. You know, it's factored in that Sunak can come away from the local elections smiling if the losses are not too bad. But how limited does it need to be? See, just as Labour need to emerge from this with more councillors than the Conservatives, Sunak will undoubtedly have won if the Conservatives emerge still with the most. In fact, if that happened, nobody would be able to criticise Sunak, even Johnson's wettest cultists. It would undoubtedly raise questions about Starmer, though. But this is almost certainly not realistic, so pragmatic Conservatives probably need to accept that even a strong showing from the Conservatives will need to include dropping down to second place in terms of seats won. But are the Conservatives even trying to do well? I'd already discussed in a previous video, at least I hope I have, the schedule's all over the place this week, how the Tories launched their local election campaign without anyone even noticing. Even the Tory press had no idea it was going on until a week later when they asked. Last year, lots of Conservative candidates tried to hide their party allegiance. Some produced campaign literature on green leaflets rather than the Conservative blue. Now, there's been a few little reports that the same is happening this year as well. You know, in fact, I actually saw some leaflets from Conservatives in London where the Tories are using red leaflets. Some candidates describing themselves as being from the local Conservative Party as if trying to distance themselves from the national leadership. This is a local Conservative Party for local people. There's no Rishi Sunak here, you know, and trying to do the same thing as they did last year. When, of course, last year it was Boris Johnson they were hiding from. This year it's Rishi Sunak. You know, campaign leaflets, they'll be getting distributed this Easter and beyond. So I'll no doubt start, I've not seen any in my area yet. I will no doubt start seeing them pop through my letterbox, pop around, you know, posted up on various notice boards. And in fact, all of the seats from my local council are up for grabs. Could be quite interesting. Quite interesting. If, like last year, local Conservative groups are putting in this effort into hiding their links with the National Party, it's unlikely that any national campaign will get the maximum benefit. So it may be that it's impossible to judge Sunak's success this year either, if local groups are distancing themselves from the National Party. You know, how can you say it's a test of how Sunak might do in the general election, where that sort of strategy can't possibly work? Also, Johnson's small but noisy band of allies will claim anything's a terrible result, doesn't matter what it is. The Conservatives under Boris Johnson suffered net losses of about 500 last year. It was not quite that. It was like 450 something, I think. Now, anything more than this will be painted as a terrible defeat, even if Sunak suffers a proportionally lower loss of seats. But you cannot fairly compare two sets of local elections because they'll be for two different sets of seats, two different areas, two different types of voters. This year's seats are the ones where Labour need to be the most competitive for the general election. So this should be their strongest campaign. But it isn't the actual general election. See, in the actual general election, Labour will have three levels of success. If they can form a government, that is deemed a success. If they can form a majority government, that is a better success. If they can form a majority government with enough loyal MPs to get budgets and primary legislation passed without sabotage from rebels, that is the best level of success. There are similar success criteria for the Conservatives as well. But for the local elections, there is no objective measure of success for either, so it's whatever you want it to be. You know, in a general election, you know who's won. Who forms the government? Right, they won. In terms of the two main parties, smaller parties have different success criteria. But for Labour and the Conservatives, who forms the government? But in the Nationals, like, you want to take over more councils, you want more councillors, but where is the bar for success? It's not clear. It's subjective. And politics being as it is these days, people will judge each party and leader to have succeeded or failed according to whatever outcome suits them, rather than the actual number of seats won or lost. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships, and until next time, I'll see you later.